Okay.
I'll introduce her first. Okay.
Yeah.
So good morning. This is Morgan Dynes, and she is the Pastoral Assistant for Discipleship and Community here at the congregation. This past May, she graduated with her Master's of Divinity from Duke Divinity School, studying to be a pastor in the United Methodist Church. And she also focused a lot on community, studying community, which is what she's bringing to us and how that relates to the church and outside the church.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Ooh, sorry for the noises. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you guys can all see this. This is my presentation for today. And yeah, I'm talking on forming community, specifically how we form community inside and outside of the church. So I just wanted to start by kind of asking, what do you think about when you hear about forming community? What does that look like to you? What does that look like for the congregation? And just think on that as we're kind of going through this presentation. I do want to say I'm coming at this. I know this is interdenominational, so I support all denominations. I also come at this with a Methodist lens, like I was wonderfully introduced as. So I'm having, there's some words that might come from my own background. And so if you get confused with any words, please feel free to stop me, shout at me, say, what's going on? And I will gladly be able to talk more about that. Okay, so the first thing that I want to start off with is really a passage that leads me to understanding community formation. I'm trying to get them a little bit higher up, but there we go. And so this passage really tells me a lot about the beginning of the church, the beginning of how people formed, the beginning of what Christianity meant to people. And so I can get you guys to read, but since we have a small group, we may as well kind of get into some of the questions of understanding this passage more. So I'll read it. And then what I'm going to get you guys to do is to find words that kind of stand out to you, words that you feel connect to you, words that you're surprised by, maybe words in here that really shine through with what is community. So I'll read this and then we can go into and chat in groups, or, you guys can chat and then the online can chat. So I'll read this. Acts 2, verses 42 through 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. All came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes just to kind of chat. What are some words that stand out to you? What are some words that surprised you in this? I'm going to get breakout groups going. Just again, a couple minutes, so nothing too crazy, but maybe share a phrase or two and then we can share back and forth. So yeah, go ahead and chat. Yes, yeah, that you feel stand out as community. Yeah, so online, if you would go into the breakout room. All right. Oh yes, I'll close this for you guys. Okay.
Well, the first thing that catches my
Oh, just a sentiment or devoted. I mean, half the battle, 3/4 of the battle is to show up. And that's evidence here, especially since the pandemic. It requires a lot of intentionality to.
Got about a minute left, so if you guys have any last words, then we'll
Ask
people
a
have.
question.
Already part of the home community.
Just a second online. All right, as we come back, if one person from in person, and I'll repeat it through the mic, and one person from online wants to share, kind of heard what you guys are chatting about, but we can let online know too. And let me. All right,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, we talked about the word devotion.
Yeah.
And how devotion implies a commitment to this gathering.
Mm.
Commitment, not just out of obligation, but out of a heart relationship with the people that you're connected with.
Yeah.
Great word that way. Talked about relationships, of course, that this is all very intertwined, even with their possessions and their goods.
Yeah.
The other things that struck me was that they were also in the temple. They did these things in their homes, but they were also in the temple doing this. And so both and the small group in their homes.
Yeah, so for online, they talked about devotion and how each person seemed devoted to each other. They were building these relationships, and they also had this twofold way of meeting, both in the temple and at home, which we can kind of correlate almost. And I'll talk a little bit about this of worship and small groups. So I think that's kind of a good summary. If online you guys want to share, go ahead with what you guys talked about. You are unmuted, Christian, so I don't know if you're intending to share, but Dave just muted, so you can go ahead.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, Dave. You guys can go ahead whenever online. Can you hear me?
Christian was muted during most of our time, and now he's unmuted, but I'll go ahead. I was just struck by the enthusiasm of Luke in describing all this, and all together. And so yes, being a Christian, a Christ follower was new, and they were enthusiastic. But I also think it, not exactly hyperbolic, but more enthusiastic than realism might have been in terms of they were still humans, and
Yeah.
so it must have been quite a life-shaking thing to start living like that.
Yeah, I think so too. These are the words that stood out to me. There were a lot of them, but I do think it connects to a lot of what you guys said already. I found devoted, right? Is a pretty outstanding word. They devoted each other, they gave money to each other. All things in common means that they shared everything. They had fellowship. I did love the temple and home. Like it's like they couldn't get enough of each other. They had to be together with each other in all these ways, and they ate together, broke bread. And I really find it interesting, this last part, the Lord added to their number. And we'll go into that a little bit at the end. I just think that's it's a fascinating concept that I think the church has, I don't know, things differently nowadays. Here's just some thoughts that I'm going to be talking about with you guys today. Kind of some ways that I see how we can form communities, and especially in the church, of course. Well, I had an introduction already, but I'm just kind of wrapping it up. This is my title, Pastoral Assistant for Discipleship. I did get my Master of Divinity this past May. I just graduated. I am UMC. But just to expand a little bit of that, a little bit of these facts out, I'm from Louisiana originally, and I felt my calling to be a pastor at about 15 years old. So I was a little youngin' when I decided to say yes to the church. I am UMC, so I grew up as a United Methodist person in the United Methodist Church. My parents were always at church. They really didn't grow up a lot in faith, so coming to church was very new to them. It was very exciting, and I got to see church. My church really formed community very intentionally. That was something that they loved doing. They loved being together. I don't know. It's okay if you did not read this past e-news article, but I wrote a little bit about my parents really wanting to form their church people together. They have movie nights right now, but they used to have Christmas parties, and they would just invite people over. Even the day after Christmas, we kind of had like misfits brunch because we didn't have family in town, and so we would just invite everyone else who kind of didn't have anywhere else to go for the big day. So yeah, that's a little bit about me growing up. When I was in college, I actually started getting into a church planting, I guess the church planters of Louisiana. So I was not a church planter, but I worked for something called Mid-City United Methodist Church, or Mid-City Church, which is a part of the biggest church in Baton Rouge. It was a bit of a split off. They were trying to form a community in this new area of Baton Rouge. And in fact, I worked on it before they launched this church plant, but in fact, the launching day of the church plant was the day that COVID shut everything down. So I did get to see the before, and I get to see now how they pivoted, how they now do church very differently than a lot of normal churches. And they focus on small groups, and they don't do as much worship together because it's really hard to do with COVID precautions. One of my great mentors, she planted the table. And so I'll talk a little bit about her and some of the stuff that she did, but I just got to learn a lot from church planters. And I find that church planting, for those who don't know, it's basically just starting new congregations up in different areas. May not have a lot of churches, or may have a need for innovation. Church planting, to me, I really got caught up in it, and I got to learn a lot about creating community that looks very modern, as opposed to like the traditional church model. So that's a little bit about college. And then when I was in seminary, I was a part of the Thriving Communities Fellowship. And it's very new, but it's basically, we learned about how to use the community that's surrounding a church to really impact your community through the church. And so I found a lot of cool ways to do that as well. And I'll talk about this as well. I'm also, this is a part-time job. So my other part-time job is doing online ministry with Resurrection UMC, which is a pretty large church in Kansas City. And they're finding new ways to meet people, to get to know people, especially with the pandemic. And so, yeah, this is a little bit about me, the work that I've done, why I really am committed to community formation. I see community formation in two ways. You guys may have seen this model before, you may have not. I do find this very Methodist, but this also has shown up in a lot of churches. discipleship and evangelism. Now, I want to say evangelism, I find, especially people maybe who are in a more progressive congregation who really affirm and love a lot of people, evangelism kind of is a scary word. It's a word that you see can be taken negatively, can be taken as imposing on people. And so I hope that I can share a definition that I'm working through, that I hope that makes me feel a lot more comfortable about being and doing life with people who are not necessarily directly in church. But these two sides, discipleship is a lot about making and forming of disciples, and it's about really following in Jesus's footsteps. And I find discipleship happens a lot within a church community, within a faith community. It could happen outside of it, but that's really where I see this working a lot. And so a part of my job description is discipleship, forming community within this congregation. And then evangelism to me, and this, a lot of people can answer this in a different way. A lot of people can have different definitions, but the act of sharing our discipleship with others, the act of sharing our following in Christ's footsteps with others. And it means to say with others. I thought I had edited it, but here we are. Not believe that evangelism is imposing or forcing a Christian faith onto other people. And I think it is a lot about how we're living in the world around us and the intentionality of living out our discipleship. I think that's much more of what evangelism is. So we kind of have these two parts that I like to say, inside and outside of the church. How are we creating community? Both of those ways. So I want to get into discipleship first. These are three categories that I kind of come up with discipleship, and I really base it on the greatest commandment. You know, love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. There are really three characters, three people in that statement: God, others, and yourself. And so for me, I think discipleship is a lot about communion with God, growing with God, growing with yourself, growing in faith, and then communion with others, growing with others. Now, a big part of my job, I think, is to be forming discipleship. So while I'll be talking with evangelism, I think this is where my role is with you, particularly today. Communion with God, I see a lot with worship. You guys have phenomenal worship here. And so I don't think it's very hard to find God in that midst. But I also see growing in faith as kind of your personal growth. How are you personally finding God? How are you personally learning about God? How are you personally engaging in that faith? And the people who were in person, they mentioned just about this heart religion, or kind of living into your heart. I think sometimes we get to worship. I know I do this all the time, where I just want to learn. Like, I just want to learn from the sermon. I just want to learn about God, and just kind of get through my day learning. But then I sit there and I hear the music, the choir, I take communion, and all of a sudden my heart kicks in, my feelings and emotion starts kicking in. And so I think discipleship is a lot about that, this intentionality behind your relationship with God and your relationship with others. And I do think, and again, I'll get into this in the next slide, but I think communion with others happens with this intentionality. How are you in worship connecting with others? It becomes a harder question, because worship seems very sometimes individualized, and sometimes very much you and the sermon, or you and the music. But there are lots of ways in worship that you'll notice, and many of you already probably know this, that we're connecting with others. Passing of the peace, communion itself is truly, I mean, yes, it is taking bread and juice or wine here, and to grow with God, but it is also communion with others. And so I think discipleship is these three aspects, and how are we intentionally growing with one another, God, and ourselves. So I just wanted to share a bit of a story. Again, I'm bringing my Wesley heritage out here, but John Wesley really relied on small groups. He found that the Anglican Church was not really giving enough. They were not allowing for people to grow together. It was very much God and individual, or priest and individual. It wasn't very much, how are we loving one another deeply? And so for me, I think groups are incredibly important. You guys do have groups here. But I want us to be thinking about, like, what's the intentionality behind the groups? John Wesley really, there were these rules. There were these followings that you had to go through in order to understand one another, in order to be in this group. And so for me, being in small groups is incredibly important to grow together, to lean on your faith and lean on others, especially during times of need. I know sometimes small groups are really where I'm able to share about the hard stuff of life. And then I also want to share, there's this paragraph or a sentence down here about the table. So I mentioned a mentor of mine, Angie. She planted the table UMC. It's Blackwater, Louisiana. It's a suburb of where I grew up, Baton Rouge. Many of you might know Baton Rouge more than Blackwater. But they had Shabbat dinners, which is a Jewish concept. And it's basically a Saturday night time to come together with your family, with your Jewish community, and have dinner together, share with one another. Sometimes, I mean, for a lot of Jewish people, it's reading scriptures, but the way that it's kind of, she took this was a time for people to truly have dinner with one another. And it wasn't a big group. I mean, it may have been the same people, but how she was intentional about it was finding different homes that would open themselves up to new people, to be able to help cook. And people would cook together and they would learn about their week. They would pray together. And she really found that that was one of the most important parts of the table. They had worship every week, and they had small groups and they had mission projects, but it was those times that she felt people truly grew. She got to know her community, which was very important for a pastor. And she was able to find a community for her family too. She has 2 kids and a husband. And well, you know, it's hard to be a pastor's family. She was able to bring them and they found friends and they found a community they can share with. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that's beautiful, this intentionality behind the dinners that they had. So again, we're on the second part of evangelism, the second part of how I feel community gets formed outside of the church. I kind of just reshare the definition. I think going, and I say going not in the sense of we need to go internationally and share our faith, but I think simply living in this world that isn't just a church, which many of us know exists. You know, we have a life outside of this church too, and that doesn't mean that our faith shouldn't be a part of our entire life. But you know, when you leave today, are you going to go to lunch? Who are you going to interact with? Are you going back home? I know for me, football is a big part of my household. So I'll be watching football tonight. There's just a lot that happens outside of just this church building. And so I think it's important to get out into that community, to get out into your community. Each of us do it already individually, but I do think that there's this intentionality that each congregation should be going out into the community. And again, I'm going to share that in a second. And then sharing, again, you might think like, oh, so does this mean sharing faith? Not necessarily. I mean, it is, but faith isn't just about talking about it. It's so much about what are you living? What are the things that you're sharing in? What is, you know, we read this passage, Acts 2, goodwill towards others. How are you sharing goodwill towards others as you go out? I think that is a lot about evangelism that, you know, nowadays we don't really talk about. And again, intentional living. I think that sometimes we go to church and we go to small groups and that is our space to be with God. But then, you know, I find that when you intentionally live in faith, live like Christ lived, the world opens up to be so much more holy and so much more beautiful. And I think churches and congregations can do that too. I think individually it's important, but I think it's so much stronger and better when we're in community doing this. So I just wanted to share a story that I love sharing with people. It says, give a cookie. I like this picture a lot because it almost looks like communion, but it's definitely a cookie. So I just thought I would share that picture. So I work for Resurrection United Methodist Church. It's in Kansas City. They're a pretty large church now, but I think this was about 20, maybe 30, no, I think 20 years ago. They started their downtown location. So Kansas City, people always ask, oh, is it Kansas or Missouri? So their downtown location is in Kansas City, Missouri. The downtown of Kansas City is in Missouri. But the rest of their locations are all on the Kansas side. Anywho, just to break that down, some geography for you this morning. The downtown location in Kansas City, Missouri, their area, they have coffee shops and they have restaurants that are just blossoming there. And at the time, they were trying to find, okay, where are we going to plant this location? Where are we going to worship? Where are we going to exist? Where are we going to be? And their first location, except they didn't have their own building, was in a bar. on Sunday mornings because no one's going to be in a bar on Sunday mornings. And so they would rent out a bar. It smelled like beer. It was a little gross, but that's where they worshiped. And they started realizing, okay, people are coming and we don't have a space to worship. How are we going to have discipleship? How are we going to do small groups? How are we going to, create evangelism with our group? And what they ended up doing was they started meeting in the coffee shops. They started meeting in the restaurants. Even today, they still do their staff meeting in a coffee shop across the street from them. So they started realizing that we intentionally live in the downtown area that we are a part of because we don't have a building. And so they began to get to know people. They got to know all of their baristas and all of their waiters and waitresses. They got to know all of these local places and they started loving their community and their community loved them back. They got to know who they were. They got to see that, oh, I'm a part of this congregation. And so the story I wanted to share is every Christmas, during this starting time, remember they worshiped in a bar. And so what they would do is every Christmas, they would bake dozens and dozens of cookies. Each family would bring, a dozen and there would just be lots of cookies and they would hand them out to people in the bar. They'd go on a Saturday afternoon or, whatever day. And around Christmas time, they would hand these cookies out. And the way they told the story is at first, people were like, why are you giving me, why are you even coming near me? But then after many years, people, every time they came, were like, oh, the cookie church, I was waiting for you. And they got to know these people. They got to see that this congregation is not separated from who the bar is. The bar got to love them, and they got to love the people in the bar. And so I think that that really shows a lot about evangelism. They didn't impose themselves. They just said, look, thank you for letting us use your space. Here's some cookies. And now they know who they are. And I did not ask this, but I would bet money that some people from the bar even started coming to worship too. Not that is the most important part, but I do think that is something interesting to think about. Let's see, hold on. Okay. So this last slide, and then we can get a little bit more into discussion and I'll let you guys talk because I've been talking for a while, are some unique communities that I've gotten to see in my time just with working and my time with learning about different Methodist communities. We talked about affordable housing last week, so I won't talk a whole lot about it this week, but Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and probably many other denominations, they started to really find ways to help fund churches who want to get behind affordable housing. And so what they're doing is they're not just buying up houses and getting people to live there, but they're utilizing the lowered rent. They're utilizing the space in a lot of, like Charlotte, for example. I learned that Charlotte, so many housing crises because there's not enough room. And so what churches are doing is they're trying to form community with the people who are in these houses they bought up or these apartments they bought up. They're trying to create small groups. They're trying to create events with them. They're trying to be intentional about cooking meals. And it becomes all of a sudden both an act of discipleship because they're growing and the other people are growing together, but it's also a form of evangelism, showing what living with Christ looks like. And so I think that's a really cool community that we're seeing more and more of today. River Church, there's something called the River of Life community, and basically they worship at the Nantahala River every week or maybe once a month. But they come together. Yes, the Nantahala River, where you get to whitewater raft and kayak and you get to hike and do zip lining, all of that. They come together and they love nature and they love each other. And I think it's just really cool. I mean, I would love to be able to sit by the river and listen to worship songs and listen to a sermon. And they really are intentional about their nature and each other and God. So I just wanted to share that. And then online ministry, I'll just share this. I'm working with their online ministry at Resurrection in Kansas City. And they're finding even before the pandemic, but especially with the pandemic, people are not really coming back to worship as they used to. And instead of kind of feeling sad about that or not being very excited about it. They've gotten excited. They felt that online worship is exactly what they need. And they started to not only just have worship service, but they have a little pre-worship conversation where they have a Zoom room, and they just let people chat and see how they're doing. They have intentional member classes where the head pastor gets to chat with every single person that is online. We actually, and this is coming up this month, we started a national serve Saturday. And what that looks like is the third Sunday of the month. We invite everyone who worships online to find a way to serve in their community. And while you might say that's really just a mission thing, it actually creates a lot of community formation too, because these people live all over. You know, we have people who live in Minnesota, we have people who live in Florida, we have people who live in Colorado. And so we're just finding that when people serve together, there's so much power to it when they don't have a community in their own space. And so just we're trying to have to be innovative. Not a lot of people are doing this, so we're being innovative. We're trying to find ways to bring people together who are at a distance. So that's a little bit about online ministry. I just wanted to say these are some of my role. This is my role with you guys. I have 3 main areas: fellowship events, offsites events, and groups. And so just because, again, I've been talking a lot, I'm going to get you guys to turn with each other online if you want to get together and kind of talk about one of your favorite events or groups that you've been at with the congregation before. So whether that's a fellowship event or an offsite event, and if maybe you don't have a favorite, maybe share what you would like to see or something that you really think would be something that would make you want to come to an event. And so I'm going to give you guys, probably about the same amount of time as last time, and just share with one another. And online, if I'll message you guys what the questions are. But just, share about an event or a discipleship event that really has brought you closer to one another. All right, so in person, you guys can go ahead. I'm going to fiddle with the online, and then I'll get you guys back in a little bit.
In conversation, but not, so we get to do a fourth. Hello.
The whole week together.
Yeah. My name's Emil Horn, and I'm perhaps going to be a future member, but I have, I'm happily late, challenged by time. I actually have loved this group. So well done.
First for me too. Their event today was a part of. Very interesting.
Just the different topics, the variety of topics that we have. Sometimes, and so I've heard a lot of the same things ever. That we all need reminders. What with the academic side. Quality, like music.
I'm Morgan too. Yeah, I just wanted to say, hey, I'm the one chatting to you.
about.
Yeah.
I have missed as much as I did. I might have to look at the slides or something. But want to participate with us, or are you trying to be in that?
It doesn't matter either way. I was just checking the time. Yeah, online too, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, I know as far as you, do you want to add something about you probably talked all about your favorite little experience.
Yeah.
In this church or so far.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna share with you guys a little bit about some of the stuff that we're doing, but I do think that for me, there's this, I guess I'm kind of finding myself questioning, because I've never been in a congregation like this before, where worship is separate. I mean, that's not separate, obviously you guys do it all, but the worship aspect is being led by people who are somewhat different than the people who are leading all the congregational stuff, and that's so that means that you guys are, have a lot of events that you're planning and putting together. I think something that I'm curious about, I've heard there have been a lot of unique ways that you guys, I've heard over COVID, there was Zoom meetings and that sort of thing, but I think that lended a lot to probably Zoom fatigue. So for me, my hope is to kind of create a lot of offsites events, not a lot of, but once a month offsite events, just to get people in unique ways. Finding kind of fun ways to get to know each other. But I do think that I really appreciate there's a fellowship committee here that I get to be a part of, and they just are very intentional about making sure that every event they have, there's a way that people learn something about one another. That's really ingenious, because I think fellowship events together just for the fun part of it, but I think the fact that everyone gets to learn something, I appreciate that a lot.
I find myself wanting to brag about one of the members of the choir. I don't know if she's a graduate student or what, but at one of the most recent gatherings after church, there was some kind of bingo game.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody was just doing their usual thing, talking. I was wondering how they were going to do the bingo game. And someone walked around and asked us the bingo questions as a kind of icebreaker. I'd never met her before.
Yeah.
And she asked me if I could circle my, do one of the gestures, and I completed it, so I got credit. And then I thought she asked the next person, Linda Karolowski or whatever. I don't know her last name as well, but did she speak a second language? And she said French. So, she was giving us a way of doing this bingo as we were sort of standing in groups without being intrusive. I thought really creative, because I didn't imagine all of us were going to sit down at bingo tables. This wasn't
Right.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
would not be very interactive, but the way this was done, I agree, it was a great, very ingenious.
And I don't know if she did that just thought of it as, maybe they had imagined people would be sitting in tables and eating and do this, or whether she just had already imagined it before the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of planned a little bit ahead like that, but I think it was supposed to be where everyone grabbed a bingo card and kind of did that. But yeah, exactly. Not everyone did, but the people who did, it was fun, because people would come up to me too, and they're like, "Oh, do you know anything on this forum?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got a couple things, and I got to know that bingo card pretty well, even though I was serving lemonade." So all right, well, people are coming back. Christian, you mute yourself, you unmute yourself, now you're sideways. You're cracking me up, my goodness.
Whoa.
Oh, he's gone now. Oh, whoops. Anyways, welcome back online. I think we're not going to share this time around. I think it's just good to chat about it, because next slide we'll share that. But I did want to just share. This slide is a bit of a shameless plug, I think, for some of the stuff that we're doing coming up. But in person, we heard they talked a lot about fellowship events and adult forum as really formational for them, and I think that's very special. But we do have fellowship events once a month. Today, actually, we're doing it's it's not a pride parade, but I'm wearing my pride shirt, but it is a pride walk, I guess, to the Broadhead Center where we'll get to hear from some people and get to have lunch together. Lunch together, honestly, is probably one of my favorite parts of being in a church, getting to do lunch after worship. So if you can make it, great. It is, I know it's rainy outside, but hopefully it'll be sunny then. A huge part of my role is creating these offsite events. I know that this happened before the pandemic, and so kind of trying to bring them back. I know that it's very new, and there's so much to do already at the congregation. You guys are definitely involved, but I do think these are. I'm trying to make them intentional gathering, so that there's conversation that can be had, and also kind of get to explore a new place or a new part of living in the Triangle. I do know one of my roles, if the question that you asked me, one of my jobs is also how do we engage with people living across the Triangle? That's an interesting question. And the Triangle is so large that people could be living out, an hour and a half away from each other. But we had lunch together last month. This month, we're going to actually be doing the Civil Rights Museum tour in Greensboro. So if you go to your e-news, there's a sign up there, and we'll have lunch afterwards and kind of just reflect on it. It'll be a tour with the staff, so it'll be very guided, and also then we can all really a bit debrief afterwards, kind of breathe. I think it'll be really, I don't know, life-changing seems dramatic, but it'll probably be very impactful. And then October 28th, we're actually going to gather at Durham's Farmers Market. It's really, honestly, grab coffee. We're going to, kids can play on the playground and shop together and then kind of just hang out. My dream, though, I will say for this position, and I'd love some hype from you guys of this, is I would love to do something where we all gather in the different main communities where people live. So Durham, Cary, Chapel Hill, Raleigh area, and kind of in those areas. And ideally it could be something like a trivia night where everyone has the same questions, but they all gather in someone's home. That might seem too complex, but even just a dinner, that would be really an amazing event for me to plan, I think, and I hope for you guys too. And then some groups. You guys are pretty familiar with groups. You're here. I think that makes sense. But there's also spiritual direction groups, life together groups, book groups. So if you are finding that you want some more community, feel free to email Carol, email me, and we can set you up in one of these groups. So before I get to the kind of last slide, the last time for you guys to chat, I did want to share a book that I'm reading kind of for this job that I find it's quite an interesting way of reflecting. I wanted to bring this up early on, and I just didn't get to it, but it's called The Art of Gathering. So online can't see this. You guys can see it. It's kind of what the cover looks like. So look for a colorful covering. But it's basically how we meet and why it matters. And it's this woman, her main job is to bring people together intentionally and to help them understand why they're meeting. Oh gosh, we're losing everyone from online. Anywho, this book really is having me think hard about what community means. And her main guiding question every time she meets with somebody is, why are you doing this? And I find a lot of churches, when they want to meet together or want to have a small group or want to have an event, they want just a lot of people there. They want more people to show up. They want more people who are present. And I think that I understand that sentiment, but I'm also wondering, is there a better way on why we're meeting together? Is there a way that we can have this sort of guiding question of why we're meeting together to be able to be more intentional about our gatherings? Instead of large gatherings, what if we had a small gathering? Again, I think like a Life Together group is a smaller gathering, but there's this intentionality behind truly listening. I'm helping lead one of the Life Together groups, and Christian and Greg are both in it. But literally this past week, we talked for half of the time. When it's usually, sometimes we mention it, talk about the Bible passage that we're learning about that week. We talked half the time, we were just talking about updates in life, because that's what was needed in the time. And so, why are we meeting? And I think for me, that's something that I'm reflecting on as this position. Why is the gathering meeting why is the congregation gathering together? I just think that's an interesting read, and who knows, maybe it'll show up in book group, we'll see. So this last page, and Nelson, since you're the only online person now, you may as well just share talk with the group. Oh. I don't know. I don't know where he is. They might have been a part of worship today. Maybe they were.
Well, it may well be that you're only seeing participants who have video on. There's still other people on the Zoom that just turned off the video. So not everyone's dropped in.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. There's 4 people. All right, well. Great. Okay. Well, we can try an online breakout group to discuss these questions, but if it's hard to do, then that we'll see. Anyways, but these are the questions I just wanted to have you guys think about and chat with one another. How can the congregation be more intentional? So I wanted to lead with this entire presentation on the intentionality of forming community, the intentionality of discipleship, and the intentionality of evangelism. It's not just about getting together to chat. It's about why are we doing this? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, honestly, and we can also, again, just let you guys share too. We don't even need to get in a small groups, but how can the congregation be more intentional with forming community? And the question too, even if you don't have an answer for that one, how can you be more intentional with forming community around you? And that includes in the congregation, that includes outside of the church building. So why don't we can just open up the floor and we can share. Yeah, I'll repeat with what you guys say.
I feel like your ideas are addressing the fellowship and then having practical areas, small groups. I feel like all of that goes in.
I like that you include question number 2. I'm not currently a member of the congregation. I've been considering that idea, I think, for decades, joined a different church by sort of getting on their bulletin before I realized that happened. And I am now realizing that I'm pulled strongly here, so I'll be in the potential new member group or whatever it's called. But I think living with the awareness that God can use us just in the greater world to be evangelical in gentle ways, depending on where it works. And we're encountering others who need community, or just all of us, many of us after COVID found interaction one-on-one anywhere in life way more powerful. We were ready to open ourselves in ways rather than rushing to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think the book club, that's another thing I've really enjoyed, or the book group. Delightful, accidental saints, sort of and others are not always our best selves. And sometimes though we have the miracle of we say the right thing at the right moment for someone and almost unknowingly.
Yeah. So just to repeat, our tech guy's coming over, so I don't know if it's if I should even say it. Yeah, I'll repeat. I'll repeat you guys now. And so remind me your name as well.
Amilda.
Amilda. Okay, well, welcome. I'm really glad that you're considering joining us. That's really exciting. And sometimes journeys take a long time, and they can take a while to really bring you to where you feel at home. So welcome, Amilda. And we were just sharing in person that each of the groups that are already happening here are really great. The book study, Amilda was saying she really connects with the book group that meets, and all of these ideas that I'm sharing seem to be a great way of becoming more intentional. And Amilda was saying for question 2, just joining the community itself is a part of becoming more intentional for her. And I do think as well with these questions, you had mentioned evangelism in a way. I think something that I really don't include in evangelism is that it's for people with other faiths or no faith. I think the thing about evangelism is it's also there are lots of Christians who have very different way of understanding God, and I think even that there's a form of evangelism happening with that that dynamic. So yeah, I think there's gentle evangelism. It's a good way to put it for that. But yeah, I do agree with all of you guys with being more intentional. I do feel like I'm in a group that already is really intentional. I mean, I see you guys all the time in a lot of different ways, and so I appreciate your commitment to this community. But I also know that there's always room for improvement. So that's why I kind of want to ask question one. All right, our online people, do you guys have anything? And then kind of close to 10:40, we can start wrapping things up and praying and all of that. Any online comments? Nelson, I don't hear anybody else. All right. Well, I just wanted to say that if you are thinking about this throughout the week and you kind of realize, I think this would be really great for the congregation's community or the community around the congregation, which again is unique. It is an interesting way to define the community surrounding the congregation when you guys live everywhere. But I do just want to say that if you have any thoughts or you're kind of thinking on this and say, I really want to do this. This is my email. I think it should be online, so feel free to email me. I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts and all thoughts. Because I'm learning still too. I may have had some experiences, but that doesn't mean I'm still learning how to do this and how to bring you guys together. I'm very new to the congregation, so I do think that I'm still learning a lot about the congregation itself. I want to just have a time in these last couple of minutes to share prayer requests that are happening. I'd love to be able to pray together since this is a smaller group. I feel like this is a great space to be able to share prayer requests. So I'm going to open up the floor to all of you guys for that.
Prayers for the search committee seeking a new pastor.
Prayers for the congregation as it builds community and continues. Well, why don't we go ahead and pray and then we can go to worship. God, as I sit here with this wonderful group who is already living life intentionally, who is already growing together each and every morning as they come here, each and every evening as they go to groups, and each and every weekend as they go to events and worship. God, I'm thankful for every person who graces the congregation's door, who comes to every event and wants to seek you and seek others deeper, who want to love and grow in you and with others. And so, God, I'm just thankful for each and every person who has that heart and yearning. I also want to pray as this congregation is going through changes right now from the pandemic, from past way of existing, and also towards a new pastor, towards a new leadership. God, I want to lift everyone up here and lift everyone up who is a part of that transition. Transitions are not always easy for us. It can feel very hard and somewhat taking up a lot of time and energy. And so, God, I just want to allow you to come into this body of people, that your spirit bring peace, bring comfort, and bring joy, that they can live in you. Please be with us as we continue to form community. Help it to be intentional, help it to be loving, and most of all, help you be at the center of it all. In your name I pray. Amen. Okay. And then stay online. I'm gonna stop sharing real quick.
Hello, I was just going to say next week we have Ian Mills. He's the assistant professor of classics and religious studies at Hamilton College. And he is going to be teaching on Jesus as votive offering, Paul's sacrificial language in Romans 3. So hope you'll join us next week.
Wow,
Right.
sounds fun.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
awesome.
Morgan.
Of course.
For today.
Thank you, guys. It was great seeing you. And I'm sure I'll see you throughout the week.